Good day and welcome back to Freight Minds. I'm your host, Tony Cash, and today I got a special guest here with us. His name's Matt Leffler. I could introduce him. I could give you all his accolades and everything he does, but I'm going to let you, Matt, take it from there and tell us a little bit about what you don't do at this point.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cash. It's great to be here. So to your point, I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law since 2010. I am an adjunct law professor at Michigan State University College of Law. Go green. Someone in the audience is going to yell back, go white. I have been teaching now for about 2 years. I'm a podcaster, so I have my own podcast called the Armchair Attorney Podcast. I do a lot of consulting work as well, and I dabble in a whole bunch of different things. But I've been in supply chain for the last 15 years, mostly focused in maintenance and repair.
Wow, that's a lot. You don't miss much, do you?
Well, what we share is we both have multiples. Now
yes.
You have much more difficult job ahead of you. I have twins. They just turned 3, and I have an older son and a middle son. So I got 4 of them. But you have triplets. That's something that's Herculean.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, my wife's Herculean. I'm not. But yeah, you're right. Having 4 kids is a lot, and you got the twins. One more is not that much more difficult. The only thing you get is you can't hold all 3 at the same time.
I'm gonna assume that you're true on the holding them thing. Having 3 is fundamentally different. It is like it might seem normal to you, but it is too tested every bit of patience and skill that I had, and I came up woefully inadequate.
I will tell you, the third one threw everything off. Yeah. They don't make a bunch of strollers for triplets. They don't make. I could go on and on about it. I know we're not here to talk about kids and all, but having triplets, just that one extra, it threw our whole world out of whack.
No.
The twins were high-fiving. The triplet it was my daughter that was hiding. And the next ultrasound, I tell people I wanted to pass out and throw up at the same time. Couldn't do neither, didn't know what to do. And I went quiet, which never happens.
I would say that if any shippers are listening to this, like if you want someone who can trust with your freight, trust someone who's raised triplets, because there's so many balls you can drop in that, and you've managed to not do that. And so that is, like, again, a testament to your skill set. So I would make that pitch to anybody that I know. That's incredible.
I'm gonna start using that going forward.
I think you should. I will. Give credit to the armchair attorney. No, don't do that. just say, Matt Leffler says you should work with me. And he seems like a reasonable guy.
I agree. Well, let's jump right in. I know we talked earlier. I want to jump into transparency. We talked a little bit about it yesterday.
Absolutely.
I know we got a couple things on the table right now from what I understand. So just explain a little bit more about what's going on there and what transparency actually means between the broker carrier that's going on right now.
Absolutely. So we have a couple different avenues to kind of unpack, and I'll start with the most recent one, which is the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Earlier this year, put out a proposed rule to modify a broker transparency regulation. So as of right now, there's a regulation on the books called 371.3. It's not a radio station. It could be, but it is not. It's a regulation that says any party to a brokered transaction can request records of the brokered transaction. And what does that mean? It generally means that a motor carrier could request from a broker how much the shipper paid them. Mm-hmm. Say, how much did you pay? I want to know. I want to know how much they paid you. And this has been on the books for a very long time. And I want to explain the history before we get into what the new regulation, the proposed regulations look like. In the old days, there were shippers and there were motor carriers. Brokers were fairly new, and I still look at brokers as kind of new entrances into transportation. Okay. I know they've been here for 45 years in a big way. But the old days, the motor carrier would work with the broker to find a backhaul. And so the freight broker would find a shipper and say, shipper and motor carrier, you guys should connect and move this load. And the broker would say, I get a piece of the money the shipper pays you. And that was the initial story of broker transparency. It was brokers going to the motor carrier and saying, hey, how much did they pay you? Because you're supposed to give me 10%. Right. And the motor carriers are like, we don't want to tell you that. You can go back in the 80s and 70s, and you can see when companies like Yellow fought viciously to stop broker transparency because they didn't want to disclose to the broker how much the motor carrier was paid. But you fast forward to today, and it's a different environment. Today, there's 2 transactions, one between the broker and the shipper. I will move this for this amount, and then the separate transaction of the broker with the motor carrier. Right. So what we've seen in this broker transparency is this idea that maybe the motor carrier can get requesting this information. But every single broker that I have ever encountered uses a broker carrier agreement that waives the rights to 371.3 and says you don't get to see it because you agreed you don't get this. And that has been the general story. But recently, and this is what the proposed rule was, the proposed rule came out and said, hey, if a motor carrier wants to get a copy of the broker transaction records, they can ask for it. And you, the broker, have 48 hours, 2 days, to provide those records in an electronic format. Because the old days, you could say, okay, if you want to see these records, you can come. They're going to be available to you in Toledo at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Like, I can't get there. That doesn't matter. Like, That's what I'm making available. So those proposed rules were out in the world, and they did 2 different versions of this. And then they were completely removed from the FMCSA. FMCSA, about a couple months ago, came out and said, we are going to do a new rulemaking, and that's going to take place in probably May of 2026. And what's going to likely happen is the Trump administration and Secretary Duffy and the rest of the FMCSA will put out a new proposal on broker transparency. That is like the biggest cutting edge piece of it at the moment.
Okay.
There's a separate piece which is challenging the waiver. And so there's a motor carrier called Pink Cheetah that has sued a broker, TQL, saying, I want this waiver to be invalidated. And that is currently kind of navigating the courts in the DC area. We don't know where that's going to come out. But my opinion, and this is very controversial, so I'm going to be a little controversial for you.
Okay.
The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has a mandate to do really one specific thing: safety.
Right.
Like that's their job. That's what we pay. That's what they're paid to do. That's what their budgets are done. And so transparency isn't really, in my view, part of their mandate.
Right.
And we look at the FMCSA, and they are regulating 550,000 motor carriers, 25,000 brokers, millions of commercial drivers, 4,000 interstate bus companies. They have about 1,000 employees, and we're going to have them audit the payments between the shipper and the broker so the motor carrier can see it. It means nothing to safety.
Right.
And so my hope is the Trump administration, FMCSA, realize that transparency is not necessarily something that they should focus on, though I understand the issue because some motor carriers think brokers make 40% on every single load. And like you laugh because like they don't.
No.
Like they don't. It's not true. But some people think that. And you can see publicly traded companies like C.H. Robinson that post how much money they make. It ain't 40%. So it's an interesting story, but that's the thrust of what broker transparency is at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, they would be shocked at how much money is not made. We always want more, but yeah, I think that's a big deal. Obviously, something we're going to keep an eye on as a broker that we are here at Siphon.
Yeah, I mean, this is the issue: is that most brokers are hitting 12 to 16% margin on most days. They're not hitting this 30, 40%.
Right.
And you can see this. And for motor carriers, like I would tell you, any motor carrier, like you need to know your operational costs. Worry about your plate. Worry about your business. If you can't make that move at a profitable amount, don't make that move. You don't need to know necessarily how much the broker made from the shipper.
Right.
And if you think the government's going to be the thing that comes and saves you, you're going to be woefully mistaken.
Yes.
Because the government is not here to get in the middle of private business contracts.
No, I agree. And even at that 12 to 16%, that's just gross. That's not actual after expenses.
That's not your net income. It's a different ballgame.
So
we're all struggling right now. That's the challenge. We were all struggling.
And I think they would be quite shocked if they saw the actual numbers on some of the loads that are being out there.
Brokers lose money on loads. Like
you have to.
That's the nature of the business. That's why I think broker transparency is anachronistic to what we do in the industry today. It is 2 separate transactions. Worry about them and view them as 2 separate transactions. And if you're a motor carrier, know your costs and know your value.
Yep.
And the goal for me is that if the FMCSA focuses on what they really should do, which is about safety, so things like English language proficiency, non-domiciled CDLs, truck driving schools, that will remove capacity in the market. And if you remove capacity, brokers are going to make more, motor carriers are going to make more.
Yep.
That's the way you solve it. You don't solve it by saying, hey, how much did you pay?
Right.
I don't go to Target and say, I'm not buying that bath mat until you tell me how much you bought it for, Target.
Right.
They would say, like, hey, how about you get out? I'm like, all right.
Makes sense. Well, speaking of, since you brought that up, non-domiciled CDL drivers.
Yeah, buddy.
That's a hot button topic right now.
Oh, it is. It is.
You know, I've heard statistics of 600,000 drivers out there, 200,000 drivers. You hear all the bad, and you even bringing up the English proficiency and whatnot. Dive into that a little bit. Explain what's going on there and what some of the statistics are.
Yeah, so we're going to start with so the three ones we'll talk about is English language proficiency, and then we'll jump to non-domiciled. So English language proficiency is the idea that you as a driver have to be able to communicate in English in a proficient way.
Okay.
Talk to law enforcement, read stop signs, read highway signs, and understand that. And this has been a new push. But let me be clear. This has been the rule since the 1930s. We have known since the 1930s that truck drivers must be able to speak English proficiently. That is tantamount to safety. It has to be there.
Right.
What the change has been is that now it's an out-of-service violation. So before, under Biden, you get cited for not being able to speak English, you're going to get a fine,
Okay.
whatever that dollar amount is. You're not out of service. Now it's different. Now, if you're found to not be able to speak English proficiently, you are not moving until a new driver or you repower that load. That driver is done. They are not moving. And so the numbers vary. I think we've seen a little over maybe 7,000 to 8,000 out of service violations with English language proficiency. But what I think is interesting is the companies that are doing a poor job on English language proficiency are also doing a bad job on vehicle maintenance and literally everything else. So it is a very small segment of the overall population. But for folks that are like, this is a new thing, it's like, no, 1930s. 1930s. It's not a new rule. So that is what the English language proficiency piece of it is. Okay. This new piece, this non-domiciled CDL, so what the Trump administration saw was a lot of recent accidents. And in these accidents, they saw that the drivers involved with these accidents were using a non-domiciled CDL. And what that means is you do not live in the country. You're not domiciled here. You're on some legal or illegal status in this country. You go to a local state and you get a CDL, and the CDL may actually extend its duration longer than you're legally allowed to be in the country. Okay. So you have people that are essentially illegal in this country with a CDL hauling our freight. Now, your initial point of like, how many is it? Well, what we know for sure is in the interim final rule that the FMCSA put out, they say it's about 206,000. And their goal over the next 2 years is to reduce that number of like 206,000 to 6,000. They want to dramatically reduce non-domiciled CDLs. And what has happened, and this is the complicated legal stuff, normally, if you're the FMCSA, it goes, you propose a rule, then the industry and Americans get to comment publicly on a website or through mail, and then there's a final rule that takes into account everything that the comments had said. Okay. That's normal. This time around, the Trump administration, the FMCSA, were like, this is an emergency. We must do something now. We cannot wait. And so they made this interim final rule as the comment period is going. And this has caused a lot of trepidation and a lot of uncertainty for people. So insurance companies are starting to drop motor carriers that have non-domiciled CDLs. Companies like Highway are now putting out search features that say, if you have a non-domiciled CDL, you're not able to move freight at all. Oh, wow. And so there's a lot of new pieces. But on the legal front, initially, this rule was stayed. The courts have said, hold on. Let me look at this, and I'll tell you if the rule can stick around. But just like a week ago, that interim final rule was overridden completely. The D.C. Circuit's like, no, it's not an emergency. If you want to do this rule, do the normal process. You can't just deviate the process. Okay. But they also said, based on the data the own FMCSA had, the non-domiciled CDLs have less accidents than the average American driver. And so, like, you're not even making a good safety argument. Right. So as of right now, if you're a non-domiciled CDL holder, you're in the same position as you were before this rule came out. But if you're looking at the future, looking at what's going to happen ahead of you, that rule's coming back. And they'll follow the normal process, and it will significantly restrict at least a portion of these drivers. Is it 600,000? It's hard to say. Right. I do think it's over 200. It's probably certainly under 1 million because there's only 3 million or 4 million people that have CDLs. Right. But it's a significant population. Most of these non-domiciled CDL holders live in Canada or Mexico. There's others that come from other parts of the world, but those are the two predominant ones. We do not actively track what countries these people come from.
Oh, okay.
So that's probably going to change over time as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think they'll start tracking and seeing that?
Oh, yeah. I think every indication is they want to know who's here, who's hauling our freight. And I think this movement from the Trump administration is to get at the core of safety. And that's why they moved to the truck driving schools in their most recent push.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the truck driving schools since you brought that up.
Man, have you heard the story of the driver shortage? Have you heard of this story?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, let me be the first to tell you it's not real. I'm sorry for the ATA and Chris Beer. I love the ATA for certain things, and I think there's a shortage of skilled drivers in certain areas. But what we have seen is there's a lot of drivers.
Right.
So there's about 16,000 or so commercial driving schools in America.
16,000?
16,000 schools that
wow.
exist in the U.S. And what these schools are tasked with doing is training drivers based on a federal standard. So the FMCSA puts out this rule and says, you need to have your drivers do this, 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 and this. And the schools are up to like their own ability to do those things. But the state sets the law on what a CDL requires.
Okay.
So the state says, we will meet all of these things, but we're going to do it in 160 hours or 120 hours. So on average, in the United States, it takes about a month to get a CDL. About a month to get a CDL. You are not required to learn how to drive in the snow. You are not required to learn how to drive at night. You are not required to learn how to drive in the rain. You are just required to do essentially the bare minimum.
Right.
And so at the school level, what happens is this thing called self-attestation. And that's a silly word for saying self-certification.
Okay.
The school takes a piece of paper, they go online, they fill out a form, and they submit that to the FMCSA and say, we are going to do all these things, or we are doing all of these things. And the FMCSA, as we mentioned earlier, it's about $1 billion a year budget, 1,000 employees, and they have this massive amount of entities they regulate. So they just say, sounds good, you're ready, go out there and make a school. And the Trump administration has realized that many of these schools, not all of them, but many, are not doing the bare minimum the FMCSA requires.
Really?
So there's about 3,000 schools that are going to be essentially removed from the overall ability to get people with CDLs. And just for the general story for the rest of the viewers and listeners, there's about 400,000 CDLs issued in the U.S. annually. So if we're talking about not having enough truck drivers, there are plenty of truck drivers. We have a lot of churn in the industry.
Yep, we do.
People leave the business, but ultimately we are producing far more than we need.
Is that because some of them, I know like certain companies, you got to be a driver for a year, 2 years. And I know that's got to be tough for some companies to be able to hire, because if you come out of a truck driving school and if it does only take a month, you may only have a month of driving.
Yeah, so this is what it usually happens, and this is part of the challenge of the industry. You get a driver that when they have like no experience, no time behind the wheel, their options are typically mega fleets. And they'll go work at a mega fleet, and they have to get usually 1 year. They can get 1 year under their belt, then they start jumping. Okay. So some of these big motor carriers have a churn rate of their drivers of 100%, some even more. So you hire 12, or you hire 10 and you lose 12, or you hire 10 and you lose 15.
Okay.
So they're constantly training. So the ATA, when they come out and say there's a shortage, they're saying our big members cannot find drivers. They can find them, but they're not making the kind of money that they thought they would, and that's the challenge. So you get these guys and gals that come through the pipeline, get to a mega carrier, do their time, and then jump to other trucking jobs, whether it's a step van for Amazon or working at Old Dominion doing line haul. There's a whole bunch of options, but that's the story that ends up happening.
So when you say there's not a driver shortage, there are. How do we change it, or how do we make it better? Let me ask you that question. You've been in it a while, because that's one thing, we need truck drivers. Everything that we eat, buy, it comes on some form of a truck.
Absolutely.
You got any ideas or suggestions on how we can, for retention purposes?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what it is, a retention problem more than anything else.
I mean, this is a great question, because the real answer is, what is the outcome you want? So I'm going to unpack this. If you go back to 1980 before deregulation, there were 18,000 motor carriers. 18,000 motor carriers. Of those 18,000 motor carriers, about 70 to 80%, maybe even more, were unionized truck drivers.
Okay.
And what they made as their pay in 1980 was on average $38,000 a year. If you adjust that for inflation, you're talking $120,000 to $130,000.
Okay.
You fast forward to today, 550,000 motor carriers. Average compensation for a truck driver is about $47,000, maybe $48,000. This is a different industry. And what I tell people is that when you understand where we came from, you can understand where we are, and you can see where we're going. Yeah. So the idea that churn or retention is a problem, I actually think it's a feature, not a bug, of what we've built. We as Americans, and your point's well taken, we need everything on a truck.
Yep.
Everything comes on a truck. Whether it's stuff you buy for your groceries, that's in a refrigerator trailer, or it's a dry van, or it's a flatbed for building your house. Everything comes on a truck. But we are addicted to fast and cheap. Ever faster, ever cheaper. Safety is important, but the world has changed. So what fixes what I recommend? And these are highly controversial. So let me be very clear. These are controversial in the circles that I run. They will not seem controversial to you, but most people in the know are like, that seems crazy. So the FMCSA requires one commercial vehicle inspection a year. So your truck and your trailer must be inspected by one of your mechanics or one of your vendors or partners who can inspect that for you. The national out-of-service rate for commercial vehicles, we talked about this yesterday.
We did.
The national out-of-service rate is 22%. Wow. That 1 in 5 commercial vehicles, if you went outside right now and looked at them, you would say that is unsafe at any speed. And imagine I'm a grocery store and I have 5 gallons of milk, and I say one of these gallons of milk is unsafe. Which would you like to buy? You'd probably say, Matt, which one's the unsafe one? Yeah. I'd say, I don't know. You'd say, I would just not like to buy any milk from you.
Exactly.
You don't get that choice. So we have, in my mind, vehicles that are under-maintained. The next point I'm going to make, I'll tie all together what I would fix. Fine. The next piece is insurance. The minimum insurance for an over-the-road motor carrier in this industry is $750,000. Now, it sounds like a lot of money, but that number was first established in the 1980s, and it has never been increased.
Really?
Never been increased. Okay. And it's never been tied to inflation. So if you were to tie that one thing to inflation, the motor carriers would have to carry a minimum $2, maybe $3, maybe even $4 million of liability.
Wow.
So here's the fix that I would say we need to focus on as an industry. One is the truck driving schools. That is what FMCSA is tackling right now. I think non-domiciled and ELP is interesting, but I don't think it plays to the broader issue we have in the industry. I think the insurance rate should be higher. It should be maybe $1.5 million, maybe $2 million. And that is, I will tell you for sure, incredibly controversial. The last time the industry, the U.S. Congress, decided to try to raise insurance for motor carriers, it was an act in Congress called the Fair Compensation for Truck Crash Victims Act. Oh. And both OIDA, which is the Owner Operators Independent Driver Association, and the American Trucking Associations fought that and destroyed it. Okay. They will not allow the insurance rates to go up. Now, shippers are making changes. Shippers are saying, yes, I'm not going to allow your minimum insurance. Yeah. I want $1 million. I want $2 million. You're not touching my freight.
I've seen as high as 5.
Yeah, see, that's the private enterprise fix, is shippers can do this. Right. But that puts more responsibility on you, the broker, puts more on the motor carriers, and it makes it so that, we have different categories of characters. I think you should adjust the insurance rates based on fleet size, but at a minimum, it should be minimum $1.5 million. Okay. I would also say that we should inspect the vehicles more than once a year. Right now, the FMCSA has no data on like 80% of motor carriers.
None?
None. Not a single thing. They know where their registered office is, but they've never inspected them. They've never looked at their records. They have nothing about this. So I think that if you increase the inspections, it would allow at least some level of better maintenance so people know what's going on, and it would cost more money. But this is the problem. If you want to make the thing safer, you want to make the supply chain more resilient, it will cost American consumers more. Now, I have twins, you have triplets. I don't know that I can afford things to be more.
You're right.
I don't think I can. So we have to wrestle with this idea of, do you want things safer or do you want to feel safer? Because those are different questions, and they are different outcomes. So that's like if I was going to magic wand, increase insurance, increase inspections, increase enforcement, and maybe you get a better result. But ultimately, it just means everything costs more.
Yep.
And that's not what people want.
No. Yeah, that's highly controversial right now. Last thing I want to talk about, I know this is near and dear. You said yesterday that's the largest, probably biggest case in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Is the tariffs. And that's funny. We talked about it, and then on my algorithm, it came up. So tell me a little bit about the tariffs. I know we talked about Costco suing the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Let's dive in. What's it called? EPA?
IEPA, yeah,
IEPA,
buddy.
there we go.
Yeah, this is for everyone listening, whether you are in transportation or not in transportation, whether you're a shipper, broker, motor carrier, this is the most important case of my lifetime. I'm 40 years old. You're a young man. I know you're not quite as old as I am, but I know someday you'll understand this.
Just give me 11 more months, and I'll be the same age.
But like VOS selections, now it's called the life sciences case, but like VOS selections at its core is about this law called IEPA. IEPA stands for the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and it was signed into law in 1977 by Jimmy Carter. It replaced an older law called the Trading with the Enemies Act, which was a law done in World War I to say, hey, don't give stuff to our enemies at war. Like, don't do that. And so IEPA says if there's an emergency, you can do a lot of different things. And what I really want to emphasize is the emergency powers of the president, we want them.
Right.
If there's a hurricane or someone attacks us or there's an asteroid coming, we don't want the president to go to the Congress and say, I can't help anybody until you authorize money. I need you to give me something. So we want them to have emergency powers. But the IEPA case is different. What happened was this thing called Liberation Day, and this was in early April of 2025. And President Trump invoked IEPA and said, we have a national emergency, and the emergency is we have a trade deficit, there's fentanyl, illegal immigration, you name it, it's the emergency. Americans live under many emergencies right now, and the average emergency declaration lasts for 10 years. But what emergency powers and what IEPA does specifically is you get to do something and not ask Congress anything about it. You just get to do what you want to do. And this case was the first time ever that IEPA was used to generate revenue.
Okay.
So there are two powers Congress has, the power to declare war and the power to tax. Those are the two things that are unequivocally their powers. IEPA does not say anywhere in the statute that you can actually charge a tariff. Never says this. So what ends up happening is this company called VOS Selections, it's a beverage importer out of New York. They sue Trump and they say this is illegal. You don't get to do this. And at the Court of International Trade, it's a lower federal court, the Trump administration loses. They lose abysmally. And for one day in May, all of the reciprocal tariffs disappeared because ultimately they said, the president does not have the power to declare a trade war against every single trading partner unilaterally.
Okay.
And they appealed it immediately, and they went to the federal appellate court. And the federal court of appeals looked at this case and once again said, this is an illegal use of the statute. At this point, tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars have been collected by the federal government through the use of these reciprocal tariffs. And let me be very clear. A tariff is a tax. The person who pays that tariff is the importer, the company in America that needs that thing.
They pay for it.
They pay for it. Okay. Importer pays for it. And so this case, at a breakneck speed, gets to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I went into this case thinking the Trump administration was likely to win. I thought, looking at the justices, looking at their political affiliations and their past rulings, they're probably going to side with Trump, even though he's lost twice already. But I listened to these oral arguments for 2.5 hours. And this is the part I want to, before I get to like what I think will happen, why Americans need to really care about this case is that our democracy, our Constitution is founded on this principle of checks and balances. It's a three-legged stool.
It is.
Legislative, executive, judicial. None of them are supposed to be more powerful than the other ones. In fact, if you look at the Constitution, Congress is supposed to be the most powerful. It has the most words. It has the most stuff. It is the most powerful. But we have watched through Republicans and through Democrats, people giving up their power.
Yeah.
You just take it and you give it up. And one of the biggest travesties in America, in my opinion, is that people identify party first, branch of government second. So it's not, I'm a senator. It's, I'm a Democrat who happens to be a senator.
Right.
Or I'm a Republican who happens to be in the House. And IEPA is the largest delegation of congressional power to the executive branch in my lifetime.
Okay.
And so you might say, I like Trump and I like these tariffs, but I would say maybe you like the outcome, but how they get there you should worry about.
Okay.
Because imagine your worst political enemy gets that power. And they'll do whatever they want to do, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. Someone could say, oh, I think there's a greenhouse gas problem. I think there's a climate change emergency. Every internal combustion engine, 5,000% tariff. You couldn't stop it. And so with IEPA, the only way to reverse the emergency is to go to Congress and say, Congress, pass a bill that says there's no emergency. And if it's a simple majority, it goes to the president, and the president can veto it. So you have to get 2/3 of the House and the Senate to override that veto. And you will never get 2/3 of the Congress to do anything. So when I listened to the oral arguments, Justice Gorsuch said essentially this to the Solicitor General for the U.S. If the president invokes this power and Congress gives it to him, there's no effective way to take the power back. Once it's there forever. And the Solicitor General first said, no, you can get the president to agree to take them away. And said, well, if the president doesn't agree, you can't get rid of that power.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that line of questioning, I think, really got many of the conservative judges interested.
Yeah.
And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce filed an amicus brief, which is just a friend of the court. Like they said, here's what our members think about this. And so as we look to the end of this year and early next year, my expectation is those reciprocal tariffs are found to be illegal. And Costco, the big retail company, they think so too. They filed a lawsuit in the Court of International Trade just a couple of days ago, and they're going to the Trump administration saying, when the Supreme Court rules against you, we would like our money back. And this is hundreds of billions of dollars.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot of money, but that's the first one. How many more big manufacturers or retailers are going to be knocking on the government's door and saying, where's my money? So
every one of them are going to do it.
Absolutely. And so we're watching this moment in time, and you never know you're living in historic times until you're way past it. But for everyone who's listening and watching, this is a historic moment. You need to pay attention. This case is more important than any case we have seen in decades. And that's why we talked about it. It's a really fun case.
It's awesome. How you say end of this year, beginning of next year when they'll do the ruling?
Yeah, I've heard. So initially people were saying beginning of summer of next year we would know.
Oh, wow.
But now the chatter I've heard all throughout the world and just political stuff, it could be as early as before the end of this year.
Oh, really?
Manufacturers want certainty. And this is the part I would say for folks who think this would the tariffs encourage domestic manufacturing. We in the industry supply chain, we know we know what's happening.
Yeah.
Manufacturers are not making more things. Manufacturers are eating those costs if they can, or if they're passing them on, they pass them on, but they're not increasing their capacity because why would you? Mark up your stuff to get more margin. Don't invest in capital, into capital expenditures. Just let it figure out because these tariffs might be gone next year.
Yeah.
So why would you invest a bunch if these things might be gone in a year?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So this is what's been happening. It's incredible.
That's a lot to unpack right there, Matt. Before we go, you got any last words? I mean, my brain is, I don't want to say fried, but I got a lot to think about and pay attention to.
Yeah, there's two things I'd like to say. One is for the brokerage and logistics industry, there's one case you must follow. Forget the VOS elections. That's important. But for your industry specifically, it's this case called Montgomery about broker liability.
Okay.
And the question on Montgomery is, when can a broker be held responsible monetarily for the negligence of a motor carrier? If a driver falls asleep and kills somebody, is the broker liable? And that answer is different across the U.S.
Right.
We have at least 5 circuits, and there's a bunch of federal circuits, 5 or so have split on like what the answer is. This question is finally before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay.
And we will get clarity on this case. In 6 months, we'll have the oral arguments or so, and then maybe get clarity in like 9 months after that. But it is incredible that that case has finally been taken up. Now, the part I would leave your audience with is really what I've been trying to do since I started this journey as a communicator, a podcaster, whatever it is that I do. It is these things seem complicated, and they are complicated. But everybody I've ever met has the aptitude and the attitude to understand these things.
Right.
If we can make sense of them, even if you disagree with my diagnosis, like, please disagree. I don't care if you like my words or not. I need you to understand. And we have been trained as a culture just not to think too deeply about bigger issues and not to worry about things that seem outside of our scope of expertise. Anybody has the capacity to understand these things. And as we watch our industry evolve, whether it's in broker transparency or autonomous trucks or anything else, you can participate in your democracy. Okay. When the FMCSA puts out a proposed rule, you should go on the website and say, I like this or I don't like this.
Okay.
This is our supply chain. This is our country. We must behave like it is.
Right.
And so my goal is to get people excited and understand, like, oh, there's actually things I can do about this. Yeah. This is novel. And that's the message I want people to leave with is this industry is amazing. It's essential. It's $1 trillion domestic business. Yeah. And it's not going anywhere. And you want to understand how your stuff is moved. You want to understand where the truck comes from, where the product comes from. You want to understand what you're putting into your mouth, into your body. This is important, especially when you have triplets.
100%.
We have so many children. There's so many children.
So many. 8 between the two of us. That's scary.
Isn't it amazing? God is good, my friend. God is good.
100%.
But I appreciate you giving me a chance to come here and talk about these ridiculous legal topics.
I loved it. I've learned so much today. I'm going to get involved more. I'm going to share it with my team. I'm going to share it with my family. My wife's going to find it boring. But, Matt, I really appreciate you coming on to the show. And hopefully we'll be able to stay in communication.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cash. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. See you.
We did it. We did it. Look at us go.